Politics Understander, logging on.
Good morning. Sunday morning.
What's happening, folks? How's it going? It's your boy, back at it again with a spicy political video. If any of my viewers in the US aren't aware somehow, we're about a day away, assuming I can upload this on time, from one of the most consequential elections in recent memory. To put my, bias on the table, last week I voted for Joe Biden. I probably won't be voting for a Democrat again. Let me explain. Now, I think the first thing that I need to note really clearly here is that this isn't saying that I voted for Biden and next election I'm going to vote for a Republican. Not at all, actually. At the current moment in time, I absolutely voted for Biden as a damage control candidate. I really don't see things getting better under him, but I can only see things getting worse under Trump. And it's a real catch-22, I think we're in as a country. You may feel differently. I know there are a lot of people who are just absolutely head over heels in love with Joe Biden, and there are definitely people who are very, very passionate about Donald Trump getting in. I am in the population of people, however, who are really not jazzed about Biden, quite frankly, very much at all. But the reason that I voted for him last week is that I live in Arizona. It's typically a red state, but for the last couple of elections, it really has been looking a little bit more swing-y. If I'm not mistaken, we are actually definitively a swing state in this coming election. So after a lot of reflection and really, after the last 9 months of the Trump presidency, it really didn't seem like I had much of a choice. Which sucks, because I would call this the epitome of manufacturing consent from your voting population, which is very fun. But what we're seeing right now, as we saw in 2016, is a lot of voter shaming coming from Democrats towards independents, basically saying, hey, if you don't vote for Joe Biden, you're voting for Donald Trump. And look, I think that's reductive. And like I said, I felt like what I ought to do personally is vote for Biden because it might actually have an impact in a state like Arizona. However, if you recall, in 2016, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by about 3 million votes, but she's not our president. Donald Trump is, because Donald Trump won the Electoral College. Because, well, the Electoral College decides the election, not as much the voters. Don't get me wrong, they are interlinked, but fundamentally, if you're a voter living in California, which is a deep, deep blue state with some red areas, admittedly, and you say, hey, I'd rather vote for Howie Hawkins, I'd rather vote for Joe Jorgensen, I, to be honest, think you should, because we desperately need a viable third party, and the only way that they're going to become viable is if they get votes. A lot of people reduce this whole decision of a third party versus Democrats or Republicans every 4 years to a really inaccurate level, where essentially what it comes down to for them is that a third party can't win this election, and that's true. Both of the third party candidates stand absolutely no chance of winning the popular vote, way less chance of winning the Electoral College. So no, neither of them are going to take the office this November. However, there is actually a point to voting third party, and it is if the third party gets more votes, they'll become more noticeable, more nationally relevant. They'll really just get a lot more notoriety, and we really need that. I'll also lay my cards on the table right now. I don't agree with the Libertarian platform, what it comes down to for me, and we can argue about this, and quite frankly, I'd like to have a discussion about this in the comments if you are a Libertarian. But what I think it comes down to for me is I love the platform's emphasis on personal freedom. I do think, however, that Libertarians make a false equivalency between a complete lack of regulation and an increase in individual freedom. My evidence for this is the vast majority of instances where regulations have been rolled back on private institutions and business. And keep in mind, I'm talking largely about major businesses. Your Amazon, your Walmart, your Google, your Apple, right? Liberal or conservative, whichever political identity these companies have, which is all PR. If you think it's anything but PR, you're kidding yourself. To be honest, I think when corporations get a lot more freedom themselves, that is then reflected in a decrease in individual freedom, right? Because a lot of individual freedoms that we have as citizens, as workers, or people in the labor force in the United States comes from collective bargaining, comes from unions. And while the libertarian platform is really shiny, I think it really does fail to address the major issue, which is that corporations will, if left to their own devices, inevitably curb on the personal freedoms of everyday citizens. And I would say if you want evidence of that, look no further than the climate. Look no further than working conditions in coal mines in the Appalachians, right? Look at how the workers are doing at Amazon. For one, Amazon is paying no taxes at all, and their worker conditions are really quite bad. Point is, if you're voting Libertarian this election, I'd like to have a conversation about that, but I don't blame you for being deeply dissatisfied with the two major party options. Now, if you're voting Green this election, that is a choice that I get much more behind. I think the Green Party takes environmental issues much more seriously. I think the Green Party also takes issues like defunding the police much more seriously, as well as demilitarizing, ending our prison industrial complex, and all of that. I guess what really set me off and pushed me to make this video today of all days, when probably most of you, if any of you are going to vote, you probably already did. I think it really came down to a tweet that I saw Marco Rubio make today. And it, quite frankly, it pissed me off. And I'll read it for you guys. I'll put it on screen too, but this tweet from Marco Rubio reads, "Not every Democrat is a socialist, but every socialist is a Democrat." And I kind of wanted to break that down real quick, because it really relies on this theory that the Democrat Party is one big tent, right? For the Republicans, that big tent of theirs could include anybody who's just, I don't know, basically a libertarian, but still votes Republican because they think it's more viable, really just wants individual freedom, small government, right? And then you got on the other side of the spectrum, like your far right, your extreme right. You've got your racists, you've got your ethno-nationalists, you've got your fascists, everything under the sun. But the difference is between the Democrats and the Republicans is that the Republicans generally tend to embrace their big tent. I know I'm going to get pushback on that, but the fact of the matter is, right now, in this moment, in 2020, we have a president who is endorsing hate groups that are going out and assaulting people. The Democrats, on the other hand, refuse to kind of acknowledge the nature of their tent. This election, they're going much more for moderate Republicans and kind of the party line Democrats. Not to ruffle feathers here, but it seems like the majority of the base that the Democrats are targeting this go around are the kind of, once Trump is in office, we can get back to brunch type of voters. And I don't think that's the attitude that people need to be having right now. The problem we're facing absolutely does not stop with Donald Trump, because when you look at policy and what's happened under the Trump presidency, it's been abysmal. However, the main distinction, in my opinion, between a Trump presidency and I guess a typical Democrat presidency is that Trump is much more vocal and vulgar and crass about the way that he does things. He's not subtle in the slightest. I don't think Donald Trump knows how to be subtle at all. And as a result, it has made the things that he's done look as bad as they are. However, Democrats and Republicans, for that matter, let's say your Bushes, your Ted Cruz, your Mitt Romney, right? People like to throw around these names as like, oh, we long for a return to decency. I've even seen some people say, oh, this makes me wish George Bush. And it's just like, why? Why do you miss George Bush? Yeah, George Bush was less openly vile. He also got us into 2 wars that we're still in. You guys remember how he mishandled Katrina? Lots of people died under Bush, right? And again, I'm going to ruffle some feathers here. Deportations were higher, measurably and significantly higher under the Obama administration in the first 4 years than Trump has had during his term. Keep in mind, this is not me commending Trump on a job well done. This is me saying that in a lot of ways, Trump's policies have been business as usual, and that's the problem. What terrifies me personally is come January, if Joe Biden takes his oath of office, that the media narrative will be shifted away from the border and child separations. It will be no longer discussed. And when something is no longer discussed in mainstream media, a lot of people may tend to assume that it's no longer an issue, especially when it comes in a year where we have a transition of power. What it reminds me of is from my childhood, when Bush ended his 2 terms and Obama took his place. One of the things that Obama ran on in 2008 was closing Guantanamo Bay. If any of you are too young to remember Guantanamo Bay, there's a reason. Obama ran on closing Guantanamo Bay. You know, it was a big part of his platform. And when he got into office, I'm not entirely sure what happened. I imagine it probably had something to do with how much he was blockaded by Republicans in the Senate and the House. But Guantanamo Bay did not get closed. It's very much still open and people don't talk about it. And I think it's particularly interesting that even though Guantanamo Bay has remained open during the Trump presidency and continues to operate as it has been operating since the Bush days, you know, I mean, they can say that the CIA no longer tortures, but we know for a fact that that's not true. The reason we haven't really heard it addressed under the Trump presidency, where people haven't been demanding it be closed, is largely because I think it was a failure of the Obama administration that people aren't super jazzed on highlighting, especially not when we're essentially trying to elect Obama 2 right now, by all measures of how Biden is choosing to run his campaign. You know, that's my fear, is that we're going to come to November and suddenly these issues are going to be things that are no longer talked about, not because the issues have actually been solved, but because it's no longer viewed as something that ought to be discussed. If we start to hear a rhetoric like, oh, come on, Joe Biden just got in office, you can't expect everything to change in one day, right? That type of thing. But you're still hearing that like 3 years into the term. And by the time you get to that point, suddenly the rhetoric shifts from, well, come on, he's been blocked by Republicans on everything, so you got to give him a chance. The rhetoric then shifts to, well, he's up for re-election now, or, you know, quite frankly, it's probably going to be Kamala at that point because Joe Biden is old. Joe Biden is extremely old. But if we start to hear the rhetoric that, oh, we can't try to really criticize Kamala Harris right now because she's up for re-election and she's going to be running against probably Trump 2.0, because if you guys think that a Biden victory is going to make Trump's base calm down, again, you are kidding yourself. You are absolutely kidding yourself. That narrative shifts to, we need to focus on winning the election and then you can do it after the fact. That's no good. That's no good at all. I hope this isn't just me being cynical. I've been alive now for the 2000, the 2004, 2008, 2012, 2016, and now this election. And from, you know, both living in it and looking at all of those elections in retrospect with the benefit of a little bit of age and experience, I personally don't feel that I'm wrong to be cynical. So there you go. I guess the point of this video is hold your elected officials accountable. Don't assume that just because they play for a certain team that they're looking out for your interests. Don't assume that at all. What matters the most, absolutely the most, is not the soul of a candidate or how much they'll restore decency to the office. The focus must be on policy, policy, policy. Clearly defined policy that said politician will actually pursue while in office. And we need to, as the constituents of the presidency, stay on them about this. That's why I plan that, if Trump wins re-election, I am planning to fight him every single day until he's out of office, because he needs to be removed. But if Biden wins, I plan to fight him every single day, because the Democratic Party platform, the DNC, is just not taking the situation seriously. And they haven't been for a long time. Guys, we have a lot of problems right now as a country that we don't have 4 to 8 years to solve. And we certainly cannot wait until the next time we have the chance to place another Democrat in office who may or may not do the same thing. Look, I get that change is incremental, but we don't have time for that. We need rapid, substantial change now. We do not have time. We do not have time with the climate. We do not have time with criminal justice reform. We do not have time with the economy, because all of these issues, they are snowballing and they are getting exponentially worse. And if we wait years and years and years down the road, they're all going to be so much harder to fix, and so many people will have died unnecessarily in the intervening time. So I guess my call to action on this video is we need to seriously mobilize and get a legitimate third party off the ground right now. Quite frankly, my ideal outcome would be to just start a new political party altogether. As I am a socialist, personally, I no longer identify with the Democrat Party platform. And I think the United States would be a lot better off with a legitimate workers' party that was looking out for the interests of marginalized groups in a much more real way than the Democrats are and have been. I mean, after all, the Democrats are supposed to be the party of the working class, and yet we're seeing them dramatically more invested in protecting corporate interests and protecting the interests of the elite and the 1%. As a quick aside, I remember when Obama bailed out the banks and the auto industry, this was painted unambiguously as a good thing that had to happen. And while I think there's maybe an argument for why the banks had to be bailed out to protect people's financial interests, that's not what happened. And again, anyone who was even a little aware of the political landscape or the economic landscape at the time knows that what happened more frequently was that people's homes were foreclosed on, and the CEOs of the banks who made the poor investments and mishandled the money and got our economy in the shambles that it was 10 years ago into such a rut, all got raises. They all got big pay bonuses, or they got let go with massive severance packages in exchange for ruining hundreds of thousands to millions of lives. I don't want the Democrats to be that. I really don't. But they are. And I would say that if you plot the Democrats or the Democrat leadership and Republican leadership on a political spectrum right now, you're going to find that they're pretty close. There's this running narrative right now that, oh, the left and the right are so divided right now. They're never going to come back together, and that's why the political landscape is so messed up. And to a degree, this is true. I would say that myself and a lot of people on the left would have a very, very difficult time reconciling with a lot of people on the right. But my interests and a lot of the interests of people that are on the left are not represented by the Democrats. The Democrats, in fact, are not on the other side of this massive political divide that's being discussed. In fact, they're pretty close to the middle. They're actually about the middle, a little right. And that's about where CNN is. That's about where MSNBC is. A lot of these networks that you would normally hear classified as liberal, well, they are liberal, but that don't mean left. So I guess the good news for the Republicans is if you're desperate to see the Republicans and the Democrats compromise, look no further than Washington. I know it seems like it doesn't happen, but if you want to see how many of Trump's approvals to increase the military budget have been just completely approved with very little hesitation and publicity from Nancy Pelosi in between her taking breaks to rip Trump's speeches and, give him little my point is, I think you'll find that the Democrats and the Republicans compromise a lot more than what you've been led to believe. Yeah, rant over. I hope everybody's staying safe. I hope you stay safe through Election Day. This next week is going to be terrible, regardless of who wins. And I hope everybody is hunkering down for that shitstorm. So, yeah. Thanks for watching. If you liked what I had to say, go ahead and give the video a like, maybe subscribe, turn on the notifications. I've noticed a lot of my viewers aren't actually subscribed. So if you want to save yourself some time, you can just go ahead, hit that little subscribe button, hit that bell. And if you disagreed with me, still feel free to like the video. But more than anything, I'd like you to sound off in the comments. I'd like to get a dialogue going. I think there's a lot of common ground among the voting populations in the United States, and we aren't nearly as divided as we're being led to believe. So if you've got thoughts on this, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, leftist, socialist, I'm going to be honest. If you're in the alt-right, you're not really going to convince me of anything, but still feel free to sound off, I guess. There are just some issues where I'm very unlikely to be nudged, and one of them is the rights of the working class and marginalized communities like trans people who are very valid and legitimate, and people of color who are being discriminately policed relative to white people. So, we can open up that can of worms in the comments if you would so like. I love it. More engagement for me. And I also like to talk about politics quite a bit. So thanks for hanging. Stay safe. I'll see you guys next week. Peace. Where's the...